Alright everyone, welcome back to a new video. I am Niner Gang Culture, and today's video we are going to be predicting Week 13 of the NFL season. So before I start with the predictions, I want to make note of teams on bye, those being Carolina and Arizona. Now obviously those two teams aren't very good, and that's really all there is to say about them. We're going to start off with the Thursday night game between Buffalo and New England. Right now Buffalo's 8-3, and New England is 6-5. Buffalo really matches up well here, particularly on their offense. The defense isn't really good. I don't think they're going to play particularly well, but again, they have an explosive offense, and New England, quite frankly, can't keep up with that explosion. And on defense, they literally, I don't think, can keep up with their speed that the Buffalo Bills have with McKenzie, Shakir. Singletary is a good running back, obviously a good explosive running back. We got Gabe Davis that they also have, and then Stephon Diggs, of course, is a very good receiver. And then Josh Allen, of course, has probably the best big playability individually for a quarterback in the NFL. I think Buffalo should have a pretty easy win here, although I do think it's going to be a contested game. Ultimately, I think Buffalo will have control of it, and I think they'll win a pretty decently close one, but it's a game that you're kind of going to feel that Buffalo should win all along. Give me Buffalo in this one. Okay, now we have Houston hosting the Cleveland Browns. Now, in this matchup, obviously Houston's the worst team in football. They just really don't have much on either side of the ball right now outside Dameon Pierce, who is reliant on his offensive line, not letting him get absolutely destroyed every game, which, as of now, isn't exactly going well for him. And then when we look at the Browns, they have a big win against the Buccaneers. I don't really know if they really kept their season alive. I don't really know if they're really in it right now. They're 4-7, but regardless, they get a win. They don't have their draft pick. It is actually Houston's, right, because of the Deshaun Watson trade. And Watson is returning to the field and playing, coincidentally, his former team in his first game back. But again, it's a really different Houston team. A bad one at that. In a game where I think Cleveland should be able to run the ball with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I think Watson should have a pretty decent game, even though I'm a little skeptical of his performance coming back after not playing for, 21 months. But it's Houston. Cleveland does have a good team. Their defense really has to get back on track at some point, and this would be a good week to do it. I think Houston gets dismantled with ease here. I think Cleveland has a big win. Now we have Denver at Baltimore. So Denver is obviously in an absolute. They're not really in a free fall because they never were really good this year, but they're just horrible, in all facets of it. I mean, their defense right now, it's good, obviously, but it can only do so much with that offense because that offense is putrid with Russell Wilson at the helm. He's been a shell of himself the whole year. They don't really have a run game whatsoever, although they did have a bit of one last week, but even then, Russell Wilson had a horrible game. Their play calling is bad, their coaching is bad. They're just not a good team. Meanwhile, Baltimore, on the other hand, is a very good team. They had a tough loss, one I definitely think they shouldn't have had, but they've had 4 games this year where they should have won those games, which kind of is encouraging but also discouraging at the same time, because it's like, come playoff time, when they're down 30-27 at Arrowhead or whatever it's called now in Kansas City, can they win the game? Or if they're up 27-14 in that game, can they hold on? That's really the other thing. That's really the bigger question. And as of now, I don't really think they can because they just haven't really been able to prove it against good teams. And they didn't even play a good team last week. Jacksonville's not particularly good, and they still lost. They still blew a lead. But again, they're at home here. They should have pretty good control of this game, and their defense has been stellar really throughout the year. I don't think they really have much of an issue in this matchup, and I think their offense, struggles a bit, but at the same time, should find a nice rhythm, being on the field all the time. They'll have so many opportunities with all those 3 and outs from Denver. I'm going to take Baltimore here pretty easily. Okay, now we got the Chargers at the Raiders, a game that, it's a tough one because it is in Vegas, and obviously remember the last time these 2 teams played in Vegas was an absolute nail-biter at the end of last regular season where the Raiders barely won that game. Different Raiders team, a lot less fundamentally sound at that. Chargers are pretty similar to last year, and at the same time, I think they're certainly more talented than the Vegas Raiders are. Herbert's playing pretty well. He had a very good week last week. He kind of, built upon his pretty good week 11. So he's playing well. The run game isn't that great, but they have a good passing game. Their pass rush isn't great. They're not a great team, obviously. They're not really well coached. but they do have a much better quarterback in this matchup, and I think that is a difference maker. And I'm going to take the Chargers to win this game over a Raiders team that's won 2 straight, and Josh Jacobs, luckily for me, is on my fantasy football team, has been superb. And of course, Devontae Adams is Devontae Adams, but Derek Carr hasn't looked great this year. Their defense, my goodness, it's bad. I think the Chargers should win this game with ease. Again, very similar to the Buffalo game, where I think they'll have control of the game. The score will be close, but I think it's going to be pretty evident for those who watch the game. Chargers were the better team, and I think they'll win this game. Okay, now we have a really tough one, and it's hard to go against Patrick Mahomes because he hasn't lost much this year. He hasn't lost much in his career. But they're in a tough one here at Cincinnati. The Bengals, they're feeling pretty good. I think they've won 3 straight now, coming off the bye, or no, coming off week 9. Coming off their loss in week 8 against Cleveland. They've looked really good recently. The run game is solid. Their passing game will get even better. I think Jamar Chase should be back this week. And speaking of Jamar Chase, last year had a 265-yard game against these Chiefs. Again, Kansas City's very good, of course, but I think this game really I just have an upset feel in this one. I think Cincinnati will win this game. Burrow's been very good this year. Mixon's been good. T. Higgins has looked really good in Jamar Chase's absence. And now with Chase back in, another element to the offense, this should be a really high-scoring game at that. I think the Bengals should win this one, though. Should be a really close one. And honestly, I would not be surprised because Patrick Mahomes is very good. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs win. Simple as that. He's that good. Okay, now we have the Jets at the Vikings. Jets at Vikings. So I'm going to take the Vikings here. The Vikings have been pretty confusing recently. They looked really horrible against Dallas. They looked really inconsistent against New England, but they looked great, I think, especially at the end of that game against Buffalo. That resilient comeback, that hectic game, that was a crazy win for them. The Jets, on the other hand, they come off a much-needed win against Chicago. Not a very good Bears team, but regardless, a win is a win. And when you're in a wild card race that they are, you really need those wins against the teams that you're better than. Mike White obviously looked pretty good, but at the same time, Minnesota has a good defense. They have a good pass rush, more specifically. And their offense, they're at home. This is a 1 o'clock game. I don't really want to kind of, make a big deal out of 1 o'clock Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins at 1 o'clock is usually a much different quarterback than Kirk Cousins at 4:25 or 8:20. Just kind of a thing with him. I'm going to take Minnesota here. They should be able to run the ball decently, and then of course Jefferson should have a good game, and Thielen should chime in on it. And in addition to T.J. Hawkinson, they just have a really good offense. So I think their offensive firepower will be a little too much for the Jets to handle. Give me Minnesota. Now we have Jacksonville at Detroit. Now in this matchup, I would say Detroit has a bit of an advantage. I think they're slightly better. They're at home. Their offense actually looks pretty good. They easily should have won that game against Buffalo. Jacksonville had a really tough win last week. I just don't really think they're particularly good. Lions are a bit better. They're at home. They're playing pretty well. I think, especially for the record, I don't think they should be 4-7. They should probably be like 6-5. I don't think Jacksonville should be really any different than the record indicates. But I think Detroit should win this game. They have a good run game, especially at the goal line with Jamal Williams. Amon-Ra St. Brown's having a good year. Aiden Hutchinson probably, no, I don't think he'll win Rookie of the Year. Certainly a candidate for the award though, no question about it. And I think they barely come away with the win at home. Okay, next up we have Pittsburgh at Atlanta. Pittsburgh played last night, had a really, really close win against Indianapolis. I think in this matchup we're really looking at kind of how can Kenny Pickett play in this game. If he's plays like he does last week, they should be able to win because their defense looks pretty good. I mean, they got T.J. Watt back. Their defense with T.J. Watt is very good, and I think it'll continue to be just that against Mariota and the Falcons. Ultimately, I think the Steelers will win this game. They needed last week's win. They'll need this week just as much, and I think they'll get it because I think Kenny Pickett should be decent in this matchup against a not such a great secondary, not a great defense. They should be able to run the ball pretty well, and I think they'll come away with a win against the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, next up we have the Titans at the Eagles. This one's also going to be an interesting one. I thought about this one. I really went back and forth on it because I just felt like this one had an upset feel to it, with Tennessee winning it in that case. But ultimately, Eagles have a good pass rush. Their defense, I don't know if Jordan Davis is back. If he's back, it certainly will make an impact against Derrick Henry. But at the same time, they just have a lot of firepower in Philly on both sides of the ball. And I think, we saw a lot of that last week, and we've really seen it all year. It's their ability to really just win in a variety of ways. I mean, they've won in every which way possible. The run game looked really good last week. I don't know how it's going to be this week, but if the run game isn't good, the pass game's good. So they can win in any way, really. I think they'll win this game pretty comfortably, although I would not be surprised if, Tennessee, they're a great team. They almost beat Kansas City at Arrowhead with Malik Willis. So they could easily win this game. Tennessee, I think they could beat anyone, but at the same time, talent matters. I think I touched on that a bit in the Buffalo matchup, and I'm going to take Philly because of that. They just have an overwhelming amount of talent in this matchup, an overwhelming advantage, of talent. So I think they're going to win this game. And they're at home. That also matters. The Eagles are at home. They definitely have a home field advantage with their fans, especially when they're winning. Now we have Miami at San Francisco. This one, I'm a Niners fan. This one is so tough because I think, they're 8-0 with Tua. They have obviously not lost with him. They've beaten Buffalo. They've beaten Baltimore. They've beaten some really good teams with Tua. But at the same time, we've won 4 straight. We're pretty healthy. I don't think we're completely healthy. We won't have Kinlaw. We won't have Armstead. And we won't have Elijah Mitchell for the foreseeable future. Obviously, we won't have Trey Lance still, but Jimmy G's played really well this year, especially for what I think the expectations were. Man, this is such a tough one because our secondary isn't amazing. Like, Hufanga's good, Gibson's okay, but he's old. Jimmy Ward's kind of had an up and down season. Travarius Ward's been good this year, but you're going up against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. It's gonna be really tough. And I know it's like, okay, well, why are you simplifying the game down to those guys? Because in reality, those guys can take over games at any time. So I think for guys like that, it's justifiable to simplify it. Like, those guys, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Justin Jefferson, like those guys, you can simplify the games to those guys on the offensive end, and I'm doing that here. But again, Niners defense is excellent. They have not let up a second half point in a month. That is ridiculous. And obviously, we look at some of Miami's wins. They played from behind some of those games, and when you're going up against the Niners, who have been stellar in the second half on defense. Of course, they're very explosive. The Dolphins are in the second half, but when you're going up against that kind of defense in the second half, the way they played, I don't really think they can overcome a deficit early on, which I think they will probably be in. So I think the Niners will win this game in a very narrow one at that. Okay, next up we have Indianapolis at Dallas. Now, Indianapolis coming off a tough loss at home against Pittsburgh, really must-win game for sure. I think at this point, similar to Pittsburgh, similar to Cleveland, I touched on them a bit as well. Like, yes, those were must-wins, but at the same time, to what end? I mean, are they really going to make the playoffs because of Week 12 wins? Right now, they're 4-7 each. I don't really think either of them are making the playoffs. And now I don't think the Colts, even if they beat Dallas, which will be a long shot, I'm going to get into that just in a second, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. Now, going into the game, Dallas is very good. Their defense is comparable to the Niners. They're just excellent on that end of the ball. Offensively, they look really good recently. Dak Prescott, he's really worked his way back into his old form from the last couple of years. Was struggling early on in his return, but he's looked really good the last couple of weeks. They're at home. They have a really good pass rush. They have an excellent, really just an excellent defense all around, front seven and their secondary. The run game is very good with Pollard, and Zeke can also go off at any time. And then, they have a good passing game with Lamb and Schultz and Gallup, among others. This should be a pretty easy win for Dallas. I think they'll win this game pretty comfortably. Next up, we have Green Bay at Chicago. This is a tough one because it's like if Jordan Love plays and Justin Fields plays, I think the Bears probably have the advantage. If Aaron Rodgers plays, I don't think it really matters much what the Bears are doing at quarterback. I think the Green Bay Packers should win that game pretty easily. Although they're not very good, I think that they're better than the Bears are right now because the Bears trade away their whole defense. They're tanking, clearly. Although I don't know why they would trade for Claypool at that point, but that's beside the point. I think they are tanking. And I do think Justin Fields will probably sit this game. And even if Aaron Rodgers is out and Jordan Love is in, with Justin Fields out, I don't think the Bears stand a chance without Justin Fields in any matchup. I'm going to take Green Bay regardless of who they're starting, in assumption that Justin Fields is out. But if Fields is in and it's Jordan Love, I'm probably going to lean the Bears' way in this matchup. So the Packers get a win, again, similar to the Browns, Steelers, and the Colts. It really doesn't mean much at this point in the season because they are 4-8, and even if they're 5-8, looking at the standings right now, they would be 2.5 games behind Washington. I mean, that's a pretty tall task for them to be able to overcome that with just 4 games left after that. So I don't really think they're going to have much of a chance to make the playoffs, even if they win this game. Okay, next up we have probably the biggest game, actually no, definitely the biggest game of the NFC this week between the Commanders and the Giants in New York. This one's really another tough one. I was thinking similar to the Niners Miami game. This one's back and forth. Of course, I think those two teams are better than Washington and New York, but it's just the idea that I just don't know who to pick, to be honest. I went back and forth on it, and ultimately I'm going to go with the Giants in a really close game. This is such a tough one because Washington looks pretty good right now, and the Giants look pretty shit. I mean, they almost, they're almost choking their playoff spot. I mean, they were in contention for the number 1 seed for a little bit, and now they're the 6th seed, and they're really on the edge right now in terms of the wild card positioning. If they lose this game, they're in a really tough spot. They'd have to definitely win the next game against Washington to keep up with them at that point. I think the Giants will win. I think Barkley will have a good game, and I think that's really all they need. They just need Barkley to have a big game, and they can win because they're so reliant on him. Daniel Jones has not looked good this year. I know some people are saying I don't think he's very good. I don't really think much of him other than being a decent game manager at best. Washington, Taylor Heineke's not great, but their defense has looked pretty good recently, and their receiving core is good. They have a decent running game. It's definitely gotten better throughout the year. I just think, they don't really have much of a counter against Saquon Barkley, and I think ultimately they will have to force feed Barkley coming off 9 days of rest, so he'll have a bit more time to kind of recover, and I think he'll have a big game, and a game that will certainly be needed for the Giants to win. I think they'll win that game as a result. Next up, we have Seattle at the Rams, another game where not much to talk about, and that's crazy to say because if I said that 3 months ago, not much to talk about with Seattle at Rams, you would have thought, okay, well, the Rams are going to steamroll the Seahawks. The Seahawks are terrible this year. They have Drew Lock, they have Geno Smith. They're not going to win any games, really. Well, it's a complete reverse of fortune. The Seahawks are very good, I think. They're a pretty good team. I don't say very good. They're pretty good. And the Rams are horrible this year. They're dreadful. They're terrible. They're lifeless at times. Probably the worst rating Super Bowl season ever. I don't really think there's been a team as horrendous as they are coming off a Super Bowl win. Of course, they've had a lot of departures and not many additions, not many effective additions at that. With Allen Robinson not really doing much, among other guys. Matthew Stafford doesn't look good. Of course, Cooper Kupp is out probably for the rest of the year, and without him, they don't really stand much a chance against anyone, let alone a pretty good team, a really fundamentally sound team in Seattle. I think Seattle wins this game pretty easily. The Rams are terrible right now. Even if Matthew Stafford plays, I don't think the Rams will win this game. Their defense doesn't look nearly as good as last year. Bobby Wagner doesn't look like he used to. Neither do Ramsey and Donald, and that's crazy to say because Donald obviously has been spectacular, but I don't really think he's been as dominant as years past. I don't really think Seattle will have much of an issue in this matchup. They'll have some great running game performances with Kenneth Walker, among other guys they have in that backfield. Geno Smith should have a good game. The receivers should be good, and more importantly for them, and more specifically, I think their defense will be the main reason they win this game because the Rams can't really move the ball against anyone, to be honest, at this point. They're just not very good. They can't run the ball, right? I mean, that's winning Formula 101 right there in the NFL. You got to be able to run the ball, and they don't do it at all. They've never really done it, but now with Matthew Stafford looking like this, they need a running game, and they don't have it. So I don't think they're going to be able to win many games, and this is one of them that I don't think they'll be able to win. Okay, now we have New Orleans at Tampa. New Orleans coming off a shutout loss to the Niners. They look really, really bad on offense, really throughout the game. Defensively, though, I will say, obviously I watched the game, I'm a Niners fan. They looked very impressive on defense. They were able to get after Jimmy Garoppolo with ease, and I don't really think there's much of a difference with Tampa Bay's offense as there is with ours, which not a great sign for us. I think we have a better offense than them, but they don't have a great offensive line. More specifically, let me rephrase what I said about the similarity. The main similarity is that the Niners and the Bucs offensive linemen are not very good at pass protecting. That is really what I was trying to say. The Buccaneers, they haven't really run the ball effectively throughout the year. Leonard Fournette hasn't been particularly good. Rachaad White took over the backfield with Leonard Fournette's injury this past week. Didn't look amazing, had a couple of decent runs, but not much after that. And that was against one of the worst run defenses in football. So that really just, just kind of epitomizes their season, and their running game throughout the year. That's just a good example of why they just can't run the ball. I mean, they just don't have good run blockers. They don't have a healthy offensive line. They have Ryan Jensen out. They lost Marpet due to retirement. So there are a lot of differences with their offensive line. It's showing on a weekly basis. Brady isn't amazing either. He has not looked like himself. He's been struggling throughout the year in key moments, with the exception of Week 9 against the Rams. But that's the Rams. The Rams are not a very good team. This is a tough one because I'm not really impressed with either team right now. The Bucs and the Saints both need this game. I think if the Saints win, I want to check here on playoff predictors. If the Saints win, will they be ahead of them? No. Oh wait, because they're already playing an extra game. Never mind. The Saints are 4-8. They're not 4-7. But either way, I think ultimately the Saints will not have enough to win this game. I think Tampa looks better at home usually than they do on the road. And, when you have Tom Brady, who is still good, obviously, I know I said that he's not as good as he used to be because, of course, he used to be the best quarterback in the NFL. He's still a top 10 quarterback, in my opinion. And when you have Andy Dalton on the opposing end, you don't really pose much of a threat. And the Bucs defense isn't horrible. It's kind of undisciplined. It's not amazing against the run. I think they've disappointed on defense, but they're still a pretty good defense. And the Saints just won't generate much on offense. Really, maybe anything on offense in this game. And I think Tampa should win a really low-scoring game, and a game that they definitely need to win because, I think the top 3 seed is all but gone for them. They need to secure that division to get the 4th seed and get a home playoff game. And I think they'll really enhance their chances of doing so with a win here, and I think they'll win the game. Probably something, I'm predicting scores, probably like a 17-9 game. Something really, really boring, really low scoring, a typical primetime game. You know what I mean? Okay, so anyways, that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. It was a long one, of course, because there were 15 games. Next week, there should be how many games? There should be, what is this? There should be 13 games, so not obviously as many. Anyways, I want to appreciate you guys for making it this far in the video. If you guys did, be sure to drop a like and hopefully subscribe if you want. So I'll catch you guys in the next video. See you.